Hello, my name is John Ascher. I'm at the National University of Singapore, and I'm here to present on taxon name catalogs for bees and how this can support bee monitoring. So I've been working on taxonomic catalogs for bees for the past nearly 10 years in Singapore. And before that, I was at the American Museum of Natural History in New York for about 10 years. So why I needed to make this update to World Bee Catalogs is because the global print catalog that is most recent and up to date is from 1896 by Dalla Torre, an Austrian, and it's conveniently published in Latin, which may be very good if you have a classical education, but for many of us, this is not going to be very user-friendly. Also, this work appeared before the most prolific bee describers such as Cockerell or Freese had started publishing. So for many reasons, it's not going to be sufficient. Fortunately for North America, or more precisely, America north of Mexico, there's a famous catalog, the Red Catalog from 1979. The bee section was by Hurd, and the main editor was Crombine. And this is still a very excellent resource for bee flower information and for basic distribution. However, it is now quite out of date. In fact, even revisions such as that of Nimidandrina from 1977 are not captured in there due to the cutoff date being before 1979. So it's now, in effect, more than 44 years old. There is an array of taxonomic work that's published for all over the world, but unfortunately it varies a lot in style and quality and reliability, and some of it is sort of actively misleading. So if you look at the publication on the right, if you like the cover photo, then you'll probably like the clarity of the taxonomic information that is conveyed by this work. So a key thing I want to say here is that making this type of taxon catalog is an exercise in critical thinking and expert review. It is not just simply collating everything into an undifferentiated catalog. There's a lot of work that goes into deciding what to accept and what not, what is reflecting the consensus of the community, what is correct scientifically, and so forth. So my attempt to do this is summarized in the Discover Life Bee Species Guide and World Checklist. This has been online since 2006 and has been widely accepted by the community as a very convenient way to find out essential information about both the taxonomy and distribution of bees. It's been cited, according to Google Scholar, more than 800 times, and it allows you, with quite a bit of flexibility, to select any combination of countries or taxonomic ranks from the family group and the genus group, and also to sort by some other ways, and you can then obtain the checklist that you need. And then you can also link to species pages. So this is showing the guide view. So this same citation that covers these more than 20,000 valid bee species and also cites their synonyms is a bit confusing because it's displayed and integrated in various different ways of Discover Life. So one way that you can access it is through the guide I showed you, but you can also access it through a link that's a bit hard to find. If you click the checklist link in the lower tier in that menu above, towards the middle, it says checklist. Then you obtain all of the names. The blue names are the valid ones that link to the species pages, and then the names in black are the synonyms. So this set of names is very useful because it can be machine readable. You may have to do some tricks like removing the subgenera so that you can reveal more clearly the genus species combinations. But in general, this is a very useful way to just obtain the names. I should also say that these names, or this compilation of data, has been mostly peer-reviewed by Smithsonian IDIS, as I'll explain in a minute. And the Discover Life version is kept fairly up to date. I've made 56 global updates with Pickering since 2006, and we have another one that we need to make soon. So each of the bee names links to a data-rich species page. Here's an example for an Andrina that has crowdsourced text and photos and maps. A few things I want to point out are that the subgenus is a bit tricky to find. It's under the name in a sort of separate blue link. We did that because the subgenus is a bit more detailed than this site was set up to handle. So we had to add an extra link there. Another thing I want to point out is that if you look under the ID Nature Guides link under the map, there's one to the bee species guide. All of the pages that have this bee species link are for bees that I endorse as a valid name. There are going to be other taxon pages that are auto-generated based on other content that exists under names that I may not recognize or think is out because I think it's outdated or incorrect. And so just be aware that just because there's a Discover Life species page does not mean that the name is validated by me or by my guide. It's only the content that has the link to the bee species guide. So a further way to interact with the data is through a tool which we call World Bee Diversity Interactive Checklist of World Bees by Country. And this makes it very convenient to get country checklists for all areas. Now, I know for North American monitoring, people are more interested in state level or province level for Canada data, but this is not shared in such a convenient way. You can get it, but it's not so straightforward. I'll explain that in a minute. So here's an example of a species page that has a more complex set of synonyms. This is for the Western honeybee Apis mellifera. Now, some things to note here is that I have quite detailed and I hope correct treatment of the original combinations and the formal the original names, but there may be some obscure subsequent combinations that are not captured for such a bee because it has such a chaotic, complicated history. For species that are less poorly known, like the Atoposmia example I showed above, I should be capturing every possible permutation of the name that you're likely to find in any database or resource except for maybe some misspellings. But for Apis mellifera, it's a bit too complicated to achieve that. So the Discover Life checklist is the leading data source for the ITIS World Bee Checklist, which is a community effort that's been validated for use by US government agencies. So in 2008, as you can see from this press release from the Smithsonian, we collectively released this checklist. Since then, I sort of on my own have been working directly with ITIS to make more peer-reviewed updates to this. So the ITIS has had a number of rigorous updates since 2008, but it is still a bit outdated with respect to the Discover Life version. And it has relatively coarse geographic coverage. So for Discover Life, you can find, in addition to country level for the entire world, you can also find for many areas, state, province, and island level data if you look in the right place or contact me. But for ITIS, it only gives essentially continental records or for the US, Canada, and Mexico country records. So long story short, the ITIS has been properly peer-reviewed and is accepted as a valid source for US government use. However, it is not the best way to get entirely up-to-date data. If you want the current names for 2023 that reflect the most recent literature and the most recent updates I've obtained about, for example, compliance with the Code of Nomenclature, then it's better to use the Discover Life version. It is more up-to-date. So the data shared by Discover Life and also ITIS are just a fraction of the data compiled in my source files. So here you can see the fields to the left in green are what are shared online on Discover Life. So it's essentially an advertisement or just a subset of the total amount of data that I've compiled. So what you can find online are family and genus group taxonomic hierarchy, bee species by country, and through the maps only, but not through other tools, you can find primary division and island records. There are also the valid names and all of the synonyms and such are treated but in a relatively simple way in the online version. And there's limited information online about host associations. So what can't you find online? You cannot find a bunch of very important information. Precise, this is in the fields on the white, that are in white to the right. These are very important things like the precise original combination with original orthography, the full reference to the description of the names and the page numbers and that for all of the names, including the synonyms, the verbatim and corrected type locality data with georeference coordinates, collecting event data for the types in quite detail, detailed taxonomic information about species group placement, life history data such as flight season, and annotation of sources and of various controversial aspects. So here's a data dump for the very famous species Anthidium manicatum, the European wool carder bee. And the content in green is shared in various ways through Discover Life. Those coded two-letter symbols are the state and province data, which then Discover Life parses onto the guides and to the codes in a sort of complicated, guides into the maps in a complicated way. But then in addition, there's a whole bunch of other content, such as a draft common name, the publication where it was described, and a whole bunch of other things that are in the source files that are not shared on Discover Life. So how did I get this data compiled? I checked essentially all of the taxonomic data for bees, which I obtained with help from librarians and very generous colleagues and through my own initiative. And then I looked at all these different fonts and languages and extracted the most salient information into these files. So the end result is very lengthy when I parse it out using R code. So I have essentially a complete bibliography, which is 223 pages single-spaced of all this taxonomic literature. And then I have entries for all of the species with the names, the type data, and the distributions. This is not published, but it's essentially an unpublished manuscript. So to reiterate, the country data are readily accessible if you want the country checklists. But if you want the state province checklist, you can laboriously check through the 171,000 or more unique bee species by political area records that I'm mapping on the Discover Life map. Or you could contact me and propose a collaboration, and that might go a little more smoothly. So if you look in the Global Patterns and Drivers of Bee Distribution paper recently published in Current Biology, we show the importance of the checklist in capturing data for poorly known taxa and areas of the world. And we show that a lot of public data resources are quite incomplete. So that would be all these areas, especially in green on the map above. And we also can see that the public data often has a lot of extra names that are erroneous as compared to the checklist. And those are shown in red in the pie charts below. So it's very important to do what we did in this paper, which is to actually cross-check the public or other data source, the specimen data and citizen science data and such, to cross-check and cross-validate that with the species by area data that's in my checklist. So a reminder that there's a lot of things in the source files, like the type locality data as mapped here, that are not displayed in any way on Discover Life and can only be obtained through from the source files. And then I'll end up by saying that we're in a good position for bee monitoring because some of the people who are involved in the hardcore taxonomy, like me, are also the ones doing a lot of the citizen science. This shows some of my identifications, mostly for bees, and the extent of them. And so we have these names in pretty good order. A lot of these sites refer to IDIS and/or Discover Life anyway to get their names, and then the community keeps them well updated. So if you want more information, the best thing is to contact me directly by email, especially to discuss availability of data that may interest you. A reminder that the bee species by country is readily accessible, the checklists, but the state level data is not readily accessible except laboriously via the maps, and there are better ways to get it. If you want to understand the checklist, you can look at the extended supplemental materials of the Orr et al. Paper, and that describes the checklist and its sources in some detail. And then if you want a further discussion, especially of the importance of the data as a geographic authority file, then I encourage you to look at this YouTube channel that was, this YouTube archive is from Lawrence Packer's talk series that I recently gave in February. Thanks for your attention.